Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Community Connect. I'm your host Fatima Aslam. Some people write stories and others live stories worth writing. Today's guest does both. I'm joined today by Ammar Habib, an award-winning author and a powerful speaker. His journey is one that will most certainly inspire all young people. So let's welcome him to the show. Assalamu alaikum Ammar and welcome to the show.
Walaikum Assalam. Thank you so much.
Ammar, please tell us, what inspired you to start writing? What was that one moment in your life where, you knew that this was something that you wanted to do?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes, Fatima, I think through our biggest struggles come our biggest blessings. When I was a kid, I had a few personal struggles. I dealt with medical challenges. But through those challenges, I found a talent for writing. And when I was 7 years old, my teacher in school, she cultivated that love for writing by giving us an assignment where she asked us to write stories. That was my first time writing a story for that class assignment, and I loved it so much, it became a hobby of mine. So when I was 7 years old, my dream was to one day impact 1 million people through my writing in my life. That's how it all started.
So, Ammar, when you were a child, what was one of those first things that you wrote that that you can share with our audience? Maybe a piece that you were proud of.
Yes, when I was young, obviously being a young child, 7 years old, all the silly things like one-page stories about castles and dragons. I loved fantasy and comic books. So all my things were about those in particular. But when I was in high school, I took a creative writing class, and that's why I sometimes would write more historical things. Like one of my, I remember in school, one of my stories won a school award, and it was a short story set during the independence of Pakistan about a couple that was leaving India and migrating to Pakistan. So that's one of my early stories in high school.
Well, that's actually, pretty interesting, and I'd like to know more about that. How do you choose these topics? I mean, especially for somebody that young and
Yes.
at such a tender age. Those are some very deep and very powerful topics. How did you think of that?
Yes, absolutely. So I draw inspiration from a few places. But one of the biggest places I draw inspiration from are things I see and hear. So a lot of times, when you're growing up, your dada and dadi, nana and nani tell you stories about their lives. So those stories they would tell me about growing up in, colonial India or growing up in Pakistan, were some of the inspiration for those stories in particular. When I started writing as a career, I used to write more commercial pieces like action thrillers, police novels, that kind of a genre. But when I was maybe my mid-20s, one of my mentors, he told me, Ammar, you have this talent for writing. You should, Allah gave you this talent. You should use it for His cause. And that's when I kind of turned my career into writing more topics that resonate with Muslims. Basically, trying to shine a light on Muslim topics, current events, historical events, and that kind of a genre.
Yeah. And for our audience that's listening, could you explain, I guess, what role did your cultural background play in, your choice of works that you ended up writing? Whether it was South Asian, whether you just
Right.
mentioned Muslim.
Right.
So how did your cultural background play a role in that?
Yes, absolutely. As far as the topics for books and the cultural background, one of my most successful novels was called The Heart of Aleppo. It was a young adult novel set in the Syrian war in 2014. And alhamdulillah, that book was a #1 bestseller when it came out. And that book is basically a novel, a story set in a real event. The characters are fictitious, but the event is obviously a real event. And I found that a lot of times people hear about crisis happening in the world. A lot of times they see those people in other countries as a statistic, not as a human being. So when you write a novel set in an event, it humanizes the people who are victims of that event, right? So that was the goal of that novel. Another novel I wrote, which was published in 2021, was The Orphans of Kashmir. Exact same thing. It was a novel set in occupied Kashmir or Jammu and Kashmir. And because through a story, you're trying to show that human aspect of what's happening. So people who read about, occupied Kashmir, they don't see it as a statistic. They see the people living there as human beings who are going through this.
Yeah. And Ammar, of course, these works are, award-winning and very
Right.
inspiring. So, can you walk us through what the process of a writer looks like? You've
Right.
written so many books, and for those people that don't know, like, how do you come up with an idea, and what is the process of writing? From the moment that it pops up in your head till the point that it, is a published book. Like, walk us through that journey.
Yes, absolutely. So, Alhamdulillah, I've written 14 novels, 40 picture books, and 40 plus short stories. But honestly, regardless of genre, Fatima, they all kind of have the same process. What I mean by that is every work, at least for me, it begins with a theme in mind. Like, what is the message of the story? Because every story has a message, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And after we get that theme, it's about the setting and the characters. And I found the more time someone spends pre-writing before writing a novel, the easier the process is. Because once you have your characters figured out and the character arcs figured out and the setting all, fully realized, the story almost writes itself. So the more work someone does on the pre-writing side of things, the easier the writing process is and the more quality the writing is as well.
Yeah. So, Ammar, anyone that's achieved anything in their, respective profession has gone through their share of challenges.
Right.
So, for our young audience, especially people that are just getting started off in their career, what can you share about your journey, the challenges you faced? I know I read somewhere that, one of your manuscripts was rejected 300 times.
Right.
How does, tell us about that time firstly.
Yes, absolutely. So my first professional novel I started writing when I was 18 years old, a freshman in college. And when you're young, have no experience, no connections, it's an uphill climb in any industry. So that novel was actually rejected over 300 times in the course of 9 months. But alhamdulillah, one thing I had was, number one, I had very supportive parents. Even my first novel came out, I was in college, so I didn't have a vehicle. So my ummi would drive me to all my book signings when my first novel came out. But while I was going through that, one of the things that really kept me going is, number one, our faith. One thing I've learned, as Muslims, Allah doesn't always promise us ease, but He does promise when we are working towards something good, our efforts never go to waste. And I'll always tell myself, if Prophet Nuh alayhi salam could go 1,000 years of rejection, I could at least go through 1,000 rejections, right? And even my first book signing I ever had, it was at a library. And I remember they scheduled the book signing for 7 p.m. And I got to the library at 6:30 p.m. and it closed at 6 p.m. So it was closed when I got there. The library was supposed to host a book signing. But alhamdulillah, when you don't give up and you have that consistency and effort and consistency and, and faith, it always works out in the long run. That first novel, which was rejected 300 times, when it was published, it was the second highest selling book for the publisher that year, right?
Yeah.
And in my first event I went to, the place was closed when I got there, even though it was scheduled for that time. But since then, I've done events where hundreds of people show up, right? Yeah. So when you have the effort and you have that long-term thinking, it helps a lot. Yeah. A lot of times people, they're very focused on the short term, right? They can't see past, one month or 1 year. But you always have to think about, okay, I'm in this, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And we don't give up, the law of averages will always play out. Yeah. Right? So even if I don't know how to play, let's say cricket, for example, if we take enough swings, eventually I'll hit the ball, right? Yeah. So we have the mentality, helps a lot when you're going through that phase of rejection.
Yeah. No, definitely. But, I feel like persistence is easier said than done.
Exactly.
And, it's now that you look back at your journey, you're able to speak about it in such a calm manner.
Right.
But, when you're in that moment and, you're a young guy,
right,
your work is getting rejected again and again.
Right.
How do you maintain confidence in your ability?
Yes, that's a great question. And it was definitely hard at the time. When you're young, you're not as emotionally mature. But one thing I learned is that you can only control your effort. You cannot control results. So if I focus on the result, I'm going to be an emotional roller coaster, right? But if I focus on my effort, what I can control, then I'm going to be more stable. So what I would do is when I'll get one rejection, I would immediately send out one more submission, right? So I was making sure I was, instead of thinking about how I feel or thinking about the current emotions, I was focusing on the effort. And when you have the mentality of, when you get knocked down, get back up kind of mentality,
Right.
it's, number one, it helps you be more emotionally stable. It also helps you keep being future focused as well.
Right. And of course, I mean, as you said, it's the effort that matters.
Right.
And obviously results come. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad.
Right.
But, from what you said, one thing that really stood out to me is the role of a supportive family.
Yes.
And, especially if you look at, in South Asian, people from South Asian backgrounds, they're often told to follow very conventional paths.
Right.
Whether it's law, whether it's medicine, whether it's engineering, something of the sorts. How hard was it? Was it challenging for you to convince your family that, writing is your passion and it's not just something that you'll do on the side, but something that you want to take as a full-time career?
Right.
And also kind of stemming from that, what advice would you give to young people, who are kind of at that crossroads where they have a passion that may or may not be supported by, their family?
Right. Fatima, alhamdulillah, at least in my case, my family is very supportive. Even when I was a kid, it was a hobby, even as a profession, I've been fully supportive. When I wrote my first novel, every time I wrote a chapter, my father would read it and give me feedback, even though it's not something he would enjoy reading the genre. This as a father who's very supportive. Yeah. So my mother, she was the one who would drive me to book signings when my first book came out. So alhamdulillah, I never specifically dealt with a challenge having negative parents. Because I think it's important. One of the mistakes I think we make as a community is we so much focus on the STEM fields.
Right.
And that's why, unfortunately, there's not enough Muslims going into the arts. Is why there's such a negative perception of Muslims in the entertainment industry. Right. So we do need more Muslims to be in the publishing and the acting and the music world to kind of bring that positive perception for Muslims.
Right.
But alhamdulillah, what I will say is, if someone is in a situation where you have a negative family, I mean, I saw parents, sometimes extended family wasn't positive about it. Just remember, when you succeed, everyone becomes positive, right? When everyone who's negative, they become very positive when you succeed. Right. So again, when you have that mentality, inshallah, I have the faith that Allah is going to help me succeed in the long run. Right. And you hold on to the faith and the long-term thinking, it can help you push past negative feedback you might get in the beginning.
Right. Thank you, Ammar. That's a great message. And we'll be back after a short break. Let's take a break.
Tempura frozen food. Quick, easy and delicious. फ्रीजर से निकाला, कढ़ाई में डाला और मिनटों में तैयार. Super fast, super tempting. Tempura frozen food. The taste of perfection.
A for app, B for best, C for confidence से D for download करो इसे अपने फोन पे. Time is precious, order food delicious. सारा पाकिस्तान बोले food पापा. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum. Time बड़ा short है, भूख पे full stop है. Delete मारो app जिसका lazy simple thought है. Add करो food पापा, scene बड़ा ही hot है. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum. खाना लाए ये मजे का खाना लाए ये गरम. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum.
हेलो फूड पापा वाले पिंटू की बर्थडे है.
घर में कुछ पकाना है, बाहर से कुछ मंगवाना है.
लंच में देसी फूड, बिरयानी, कढ़ाई वगैरह.
फास्ट फूड में पिज्जा, जिंगर, सैंडविच जरा देख लेना. बारबेक्यू, गोला कबाब, बिहारी बोटी, etc. सी फूड, आइसक्रीम, केक और बेवरेजेस. ग्रोसरी में सब मसाले, चटनी, केचप सारी डालें. सब्जियां, फ्रूट,
कैसा गोश्त भी भगवा लेना.
बेगम ने पकड़ा दी लिस्ट, कोई ना बहाना है. ट्रैफिक के झंझट में मुझे नहीं जाना है. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum. Rum pum pum, food पापा dum.
The law offices of Ammar Khwaja is a Houston-based personal injury law firm. Founded in 2018 by attorney Ammar Khwaja, the firm represents clients injured in car accidents, truck collisions, workplace incidents, and more, offering every client personal attention, honest guidance, and relentless advocacy. Whether you're facing medical bills, lost income, or insurance disputes, the law offices of Ammar Khwaja is here to protect your rights. And with a proven track record and a commitment to results, they stand by their promise. If you've been injured, contact the law offices of Ammar Khwaja. Let a trusted team fight for the recovery you deserve.
Anytime you've been injured in an auto accident or a workplace accident, a slip and fall, and it's not your fault, call the law office of Ammar Khwaja. We're here to help you. 1-833-GET-OMAR, www.attorneyomar.com.
When a loved one suffers a stroke or neurological disorder, finding specialized care in Pakistan can be overwhelming. Too many families struggle to access the treatment they need. Helping Hand USA is expanding access to care. The Karachi Institute of Neurological Diseases and Rehabilitation Kind R is a state-of-the-art hospital, supported by 130-plus satellite clinics. The first phase is nearly complete and will launch in the second half 2025. As excitement builds, it is anticipated to set new standards for neurological care in Pakistan. Give zakat and sadaqah through Helping Hand USA today and join this historic endeavor to redefine healthcare for the future in Pakistan.
Welcome back to the show. So, Ammar, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Ammar, tell me, if there's somebody today, a young writer, that perhaps has been working on a manuscript and wants to get it published. You've obviously published so many different pieces. What does the process look like? What are the challenges that somebody can face, and also what tips can you give somebody?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question. So when it comes to fiction and publishing through traditional channels, there are basically two kinds of ways to publish it. You can publish it through a big publisher or publish it through a small publisher.
Okay.
The difference in process is if you want to go through a big publisher, you have to first sign on with a book agent. And the agent will then work to sell the book to the publisher, because the big publishers will not take direct submissions from authors, while small publishers will take direct submissions from authors. The big difference, obviously, is if you go to a big publisher, they'll do more to market the book and so on and so forth, while small publishers won't have the marketing budget that a big one will have. And the tips I will give is that the biggest mistake I made, one of the reasons I went through a lot of rejections, is I'd never had published a short story before publishing a novel.
Okay.
So if you're a new author, the biggest advice I would say is get 2 or 3 short stories published. That way you have a bit of resume for your book, and you've kind of shown your writing style and your abilities. That's the biggest tip I'll give. But regardless of which path you choose, it's not where you start, where you finish. My first novel went through a small publisher, but alhamdulillah, it worked out in the long run. Sometimes the first novel is really just to get your feet wet and build those connections for future projects.
Right. Ammar, something that comes to mind now that you're saying this, how does somebody balance kind of being, unleashing their creativity,
right,
with kind of like the practical business side of selling books or
right,
publishing books? So, is there a balance, if I may ask?
Yes, that's a good question. Yep. So publishing a book through publishers is definitely a team effort. You start stuff as your project, but when you sign with a publisher, it becomes their project.
Right.
Like any other project with multiple team members, there's some compromise. So when you're working with a publisher, always ask yourself, what things am I not willing to compromise, and what things am I willing to compromise, right? So if your message has a very important message, maybe that message is what a person does not want to compromise on, but the publisher says, this scene can be deleted, this scene can be deleted, maybe compromise on those things, right? So basically, when you're working with a publisher, the biggest advice is pick your battles. You can't win every battle because everyone has to be happy with the project. but pick your battles wisely when you're going through that process with a publisher.
Right. And is there, you obviously written many books. What's your favorite one and why?
My favorite book that I've written?
Yeah.
Yes, my favorite novel is probably, it's kind of hard because it's like asking what's my favorite child, right? Yeah. My favorite one is probably The Orphans of Kashmir. Because coming from a Pakistani heritage, obviously the Kashmir conflict is very important to us. And I feel like that had a lot of meaning to it because that's the project that not a lot of people knew about and know about in America. But when that book came out, I got a lot of emails, letters, messages from Americans, people in Canada, people in Europe, saying how that novel opened their eyes to what was happening there because it doesn't get a lot of coverage.
Right.
And back in 2018, one of the reasons I wrote the novel is when I looked up books about Kashmir, I could count them on one hand. It's not a lot, especially written in English. And even though it was a battle to get it published, I knew that I was the one who needed to write it because no one else seemed to be doing it. And alhamdulillah, that's one novel that's very dear to my heart.
So when you write something, do you believe stories have the power to heal?
Yes, absolutely. I think stories will change people's, because stories have the ability to emotionally connect in a way that maybe a nonfiction book can't, right? So that emotional connection with the reader is what really can heal, or it can change someone, or it can open someone's eyes in a way that maybe a news report or a nonfiction book can't. So
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you were just, mentioning that, about Pakistan. So you're obviously someone that's born and raised in
Right.
Texas.
Yes.
But, your parents from Pakistan.
Right.
Does it feel sometimes that you're carrying two worlds?
It does.
Yeah.
I would absolutely agree. But one thing I believe is you can never forget where you come from. Your roots will make you who you are. And that's one of the reasons when I was a kid, I loved hearing my grandparents' stories about their lives. Because all my grandparents had very tough lives at some point. But, they always kind of pushed through it and did their best. And honestly, when I think about it, we kind of stand on the shoulders of our parents and our grandparents. So when we respect our heritage, that's when we honor their sacrifices. That's why I think it's important, even to someone like myself. I was born in the Houston area, grew up here, American citizen, obviously. But you have to respect your heritage. Otherwise, it's going to be lost in the future.
And of course, your heritage and your background gives you a unique perspective.
Exactly.
That shows up through your work. But has it ever also led to challenges? Like, what are there specific challenges that a South Asian writer or somebody with an immigrant background faces that maybe perhaps somebody else wouldn't?
Right, absolutely. And our background gives us a unique perspective, but it also gives us unique challenges.
Yeah.
When I was writing the Kashmir novel, for example, it was a battle to do it. So I started writing my first novel, like I mentioned, when I was 18. That was back in 2012. So after about a decade of working really hard, I kind of brought myself to a good point in my writing career. And at the time I wrote the Kashmir novel, I had an offer from a production company, to keep me on a retainer as a writer for their staff. But one of the stipulations was they wanted to get to say what I published or didn't publish while I worked for them. And when they found out about the Kashmir novel, they thought it was too controversial of a topic and told me if I signed with them, I couldn't publish the book. And honestly, Fatima, that was a hard choice. You work 10 years in your career to get to this point, and what do you do? But one story I drew inspiration from was a story in Islam about Lady Hajar when she was in the desert with Ismail alayhi salam. And I remember reading when she was in the desert, what she said to herself was, Allah will not abandon us. Meaning when you do the right thing, Allah doesn't abandon you, right? And so to make a long story short, I turned that contract down and ended up losing my agent at the time, losing a couple of publishing deals for that, and ended up self-publishing the Kashmir novel. But, alhamdulillah, Allah is great, because when you do the right thing, He always rewards you. And even though it was self-published, it was a tremendous success and opened the doors to working with Noor Kids, a Islam publisher. It opened the doors to getting a chance to work with 20th Century Studios on one of their projects as well. So yeah, sometimes when you write, when you try to have your voice heard, there are people that might not want to hear it. But when you stick to your principles, I do think that Allah is always going to reward that and open up the right doors for us.
Right, right. And that's definitely true. So, Ammar, what do you hope, if there's a young South Asian or young Muslim writer watching this right now, what's one thing you hope that they can learn from your journey?
Yes, that's a great question. I would say number one, know what you stand for, and I think if you have a talent for something, it's because you're meant to do it. So you have a talent for writing, just know you're meant to do it. If the world tells you no, say yes and go for it. And remember, adversity isn't meant to tell us that we're not meant to do it. Sometimes we have to be forged through fire. So when there's adversity, sometimes that adversity helps us become who we're meant to become, right? And when you go into these fields of art, always remember your principles are more important than anything else, because money will come and go. But if you stick to your principles, number one, the most important thing is you can be happy when you look in the mirror, who you see back. And number two, in the long run, if you stick to your principles, the right doors will always open, even if some doors do close.
Yeah, and then, that's a great message, especially for our youth. So, Ammar, is there a particular message, that you got from a reader that really stuck with you? Maybe somebody read your work,
right.
Maybe reached out to you. Like, is there anything that you can think of that really sticks out?
Yes, absolutely. One thing that I find, I think one of the best parts of succeeding is helping someone else succeed. Not a particular message, but several times in my career, I've had people reach out to me saying, "Hey, I loved your book. Do you have any advice for me?" When I started my career as a writer, I remember I reached out to some authors I knew, and no one ever gave me advice. One reason I struggled a little bit in the beginning. So one thing I told myself when I was a new author is when I succeed, inshallah, I will never not help someone who wants to write. So one of the most rewarding things for me is being able to help other authors get their start and find their voice and help them kind of navigate their early publishing efforts.
Yeah. And, when these young authors reach out to you, what kind of advice are they looking for? Like, what issues, not necessarily issues, but,
right.
What are kind of obstacles that they're facing,
yes.
That you can help them with?
Yeah, absolutely. Go back to the question you asked earlier. It's kind of that fear of the unknown. A lot of people don't know how the industry works. Where do I start? What do I do? How do I put together a pitch? Those small technical things, right? So a lot of times I'll tell them, hey, this is how the industry works. I'll give them an example of a pitch, like a template for a pitch they can use, and those kind of things.
Yeah.
The book has to sell itself, but you can do things to put yourself in a position that more people pay attention to that work when you're pitching it.
So, Ammar, what are some future projects that we can look forward to? What are you working on? And, what kind of things can we expect from you in the future?
Yes, absolutely. So right now, I've written a 6-book picture book series. It's about basically important Muslims who don't get the credit they should get.
Right.
Like, for example, one's about Abbas ibn Firnas, the first man to fly. One is about Zubaydah bint Jafar. She was a queen who helped save Makkah Medina during a drought. So my agent is working on selling that project right now. And then the other project is another historical novel. It's set during the Pakistan independence. And it's about a 16-year-old boy and his baby sister who come across the border to Lahore, and their story of overcoming the trauma of what they saw when they were trying to escape India, and basically finding a new life in a new country. Yeah. So the 2 projects on the horizon.
Yeah. And that's great, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
But my last question to you is, if what do you want people to remember about you when they look at your body of work? 50 years, 100 years down the line.
Yes.
People go, books remain forever.
Yes.
So how do you wish people remember you and your work?
Yes. One of my dreams, Fatima, is to write one book that really stands the test of time. One book that really changes the world. There are some books that came out and they've really made a big impact on their generation, right? So my dream is to write one book that 500 years from now is still being talked about and read, by people.
Yeah. And Ammar, we really wish that, you get to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show and giving us such inspirational content for our viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Hum TV, for providing us with this platform. And thank you to our sponsors for sponsoring this show. See you next time with a new episode and a new guest.